Well, hey everybody, it's just Steve here. This show is pretty simple. It's just me talking with people who I think are really interesting. People that I think have insights that more people need to hear. And so today, I'm super excited. I get the opportunity to chat with Shaun Johnson. So Shaun, the first easy question I have for you is, where are you calling in from?
Well, I'm actually calling in from quarantine here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where I live with my wife and three daughters, typically singing on the road at this point, but most of our shows have been canceled or postponed through April and May. So instead, I am working on other ventures, still working on the singing part, but also writing songs and reaching out to others and trying to do what I can do like everybody else in the country.
Yeah, and that leads to the kind of the second easy question, which is, what do you do? What do you normally do? How do you occupy your time? So the people that don't know who you are, kind of give us a view into who is Shaun Johnson.
Well, absolutely. I grew up in the Midwest and went to school in Minnesota at St. John's University, but my job has become, which surprised me because I never set out to be what I am, but it's a full-time professional singer. I sing with a group called Tonic Stolfa, which is an a cappella group, and I've been doing that since I left college, so a long time ago. I'm not going to say how long. And then a few years ago, I started a big band, also in the music field, which is just to raise money for charity. So I kind of balance my time between those tracks. But in saying that, you also run a small business. I'm the sole owner of both of those groups. And like everybody out there who runs a small business, you have all of the other things to worry about, whether it's marketing or whether it's taxes or whether it might be relationships with others, collaborations and such. So there's 1,000 pieces like anybody, again, doing such a thing as I. And in between, you get to teach classes and you get to give speeches, and there's so many different adventures and exciting, I guess, pieces of what turned out to be a career, what I thought was just something that was a hobby. And it's been so interesting because I never grew up thinking you could even do this. No one ever said to me, you could be a singer or something in the, acting or a music business. It was more, are you going to be a doctor? Are you going to be a race car driver? Are you going to be an astronaut? And so it's been interesting because at points I've thought, is this what I'm even supposed to be doing? I think the people around me said, oh, you're going to be a great lawyer or you should be an author. Never did I think I would stand on stage for a living. So a million pieces to it, though. There's more than just singing, as I said. And a lot of the pieces outside of the singing are some of the things I enjoy most. Like songwriting, for instance. I love songwriting. As frustrating as it can be, it's also very interesting. So it's something I get to work on more now that we are social distancing and now that we are apart from each other.
Well, I find it so interesting that, what I know of you, and we've had an opportunity to connect, outside of just watching Tonic Solfa, but, when I watch you on stage and I see the energy and I see the excitement and I talk to you afterwards and it feels like that's a legitimate, real excitement. You love doing it. It's hard to imagine you like it feels like you were born to be an entertainer. And so it's funny, to think of you as not in that vein all the time. Like, it just feels like you must have been that kid that just sort of grew up knowing you were going to be on stage all the time. And it's interesting to hear you say, no, not really. And it makes me think about how many people do we put into that camp where we think, oh, they must have always wanted to be a doctor or always wanted to be a mathematician or whatever. And maybe the reality is they didn't.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because for me, I certainly love to sing. I sang my whole life. I always was singing. My mom would say, you would, between bites of food, hum, and then you would sing a song, and then you'd eat another bite. And she goes, it just drove us insane. But I also remember singing in the basement of our house. I would sing a song. My mom would come down the stairs quietly, and she'd listen on the stairs. And I knew she was there, and she knew I heard her. But I would sing song after song after song, and she'd listen and say, "Oh, I think you sound better than Elvis," or whatever it might be. And so, very encouraging. But
Yeah.
I really like school, so I was one of those weird kids, but I was also super shy. And so I had a really close knit circle of, a couple of friends. I wasn't Mr. Popular by any means, and I didn't sing in grade school or junior high other than what I was forced to do in our school. But yeah, I think it was kind of a happy accident in some ways to go off of what you said. I mean, I would like to say, no, I planned this and I did this, and I've heard those stories, but I think it's like writing a song because people always say, how do you write a song? And I think, well, for me, I always come up with melodies tend to be, and I have a word or a phrase that makes sense and I go from there, but I struggle with writing words. Other people, they write a poem and they struggle
Hmm.
with coming up with a melody. And it just, you find everybody writes their song a different way, and not to be cliched, but that's to me how I found music was probably much different than people, but it's still, in my opinion, a legitimate way. And it was a happy accident when I first started with Tonic Solfa. There was five people, and I only sang one song, and I didn't talk. They were
Hmm.
basically like, "Here's your song for the hour show. Don't say anything. We basically have an MC." And so it's interesting now because I sort of am the quote
Yeah.
unquote MC. I don't think that's how we say it. And you sing a lot of the songs. And that happened for a variety of reasons. It wasn't because I thought I was great or we all sat down and chose it. I mean, it was a slow process. But if right now somebody said, I could go back all these years and somebody said, okay, Shaun, go out on stage and you're going to do all the talking, you're going to do all the singing, I would have failed miserably.
Hmm.
So it was good in my experience that I had all this time to slowly develop that because now, yeah, I feel like when I go on stage, that is me and I'm so excited and so passionate. That's true. There's nothing fake about it, but I grew into it. I certainly didn't just come that way.
I love that. Now, I don't know if you were trying to be super profound when you said this, when you said everyone writes their song a different way. I mean, that's literal when you're talking about music, but that just struck me as that's just so true in life. And maybe that's what the parallel is that you're drawing is you kind of wrote this song in your own way, right? I mean, you got to becoming a lead singer and an owner of two different groups, and you kind of wrote it your own way.
Yeah, I think so. And that's the thing. I admire the people that are like, from 2 years on, I knew I was going to do this. I was
Right.
going to be a welder and I was going to be the greatest welder in the world. And I think that's awesome because you knew what you're doing. And I think, the grass is always greener on another side. But sometimes I've looked at that and said, man, I wish that had been me. I wish I knew that because look at all the struggles and things I would
Yeah.
not have had to do if I knew I just wanted to be a singer. But like you just mentioned and alluded to, I think it's very true is that just as again, it might be a little bit overstated or cliched, but I do think people come into what they're going to do completely different. I think in some ways, though, there still is the common denominator of wanting to do it, or maybe just acting on it or doing it. Because if you wish about it all the time, or think about it all the time, or hope all the time, or gee, I could do that all the time, you don't go anywhere.
Hmm.
But I think if you have the action in any way, the one footstep, then sooner or later, in your own way, like you said, in your own way of writing that song, you will write it.
Well, I'd love to have you talk a little bit more about that, the idea of intentionality. I know so many people who have told me over the years, man, I wish I could play piano, or I want to know how to play guitar, or I wish I'd gone back, and gotten a degree. And this is even true of my wife, who would say for years, I want to know how to play piano. And one day I said, well, the problem is you want to know how to play piano, you don't want to learn how to play piano. And there's a big difference there,
How'd that go?
Oh yeah.
How'd that
Well,
go
it took
over?
it took years for me to muster it up to tell Tracy that, but I said it lovingly, but I followed it with
Yes.
let's help you learn piano. And she started taking piano lessons at age 30 or something, and she'd be at these recitals with 6 year olds who have their stuff memorized and they're crushing it, and she's like plunking away with sheet music. But I was so proud of her, right? But but it took
Yeah.
intentionality to move from okay, I want to do that to I'm actually going to do that. And I wonder, same thing, like people look at you and say, oh my gosh, that would be so fun. Now, like you said, they don't know all that goes into running a small business, but I think there's so many people that generally have this sense of I want to do that, I wish I could do that, but they either don't have the opportunity or they don't take that step of intentionality to get there. So I'd be curious to have you share a little bit more around whether it's specific to your example or just in general, how do we muster up what we need to muster up to have intentionality to basically live the life that we want to live versus just kind of watching it and hoping from a distance?
Well, boy, if I had the answer to that, I'd make $1 trillion. But I
Well,
think
why are
in
you on
my
the show, Shaun?
own
This is why you're on the show.
well, I'm providing answers, but only in the second half of the show.
Oh,
We're not to the
right.
second half.
Okay,
That's where all the
fair enough.
answers come in.
I'll come back to that question
Yes,
later.
so keep listening and get your notepad.
Right. After this commercial break.
Because then we're going to get to the heart of life. I'm going to tell you everything you ever wanted to know.
After you've heard from all of our sponsors, then we'll tell you the answers.
Yeah, exactly. Click on the link.
Right.
No, I think I think in any of those, it's a great question, and I am like everybody else in that I was the same way as your wife in some ways, saying I really want to learn guitar, I really need to do this. And I think the only thing I can say about that is every single time I took that first step, it worked. Every time. Every single time it worked. Now it worked in, as everyone will say, how you wanted it to. I have an experience very much like your wife in that I wanted to take guitar. I've always wanted to learn guitar. Every time I see a guitarist, I'm like, oh man, that would help me so much in my, career and songwriting. So I started taking guitar lessons. But as I did it in the last year or two, I wasn't that good at it. It was frustrating, but I kept doing it. I kept trying, and it was hard for me to practice. I didn't like it as much as I liked to do other things. I like voice lessons, which is very similar. But then it was interesting because the gentleman I was taking guitar lessons from, kept helping me. And finally one day I said, why don't I pay you the same amount and you help me write songs? Because I was going back and forth with people in Nashville on Zoom and on, those kind of getting together in meetings and such. And he said, oh, okay, I've never written songs though. And I said, well, I'm going to come into the melodies. You're such an amazing guitar player. If you don't mind, help me. Well, we started this sort of relationship over the last year of going to a lesson each week, but the lesson has now become like a songwriting session together in Sioux Falls. And in that time, we've probably written 40 or 50 original songs, more than I had written in the 5 years before that of trying to be well-intentioned, heading to Nashville or finding someone in the cities and making the 8-hour drive to write a song or the 12-hour drive to write a song. And so it's crazy because now all of a sudden I have all these songs, all these different cuts that could be for other artists. I'm really proud of a lot of it. It's forced me to kind of work on that craft. And I don't want to be, to simplify it too much, but it was interesting is even taking that step, it didn't go the way I thought. I haven't learned guitar, and my 12-year-old is much better at guitar than me in a much shorter time. And I don't even know if I really wanted to play guitar. I think it was just I liked the idea of how much it would help me and I should start. But what came out of it was even more. And I have waited, like a lot of people, to do a lot of things. I had thought of starting a big band probably 15 years ago, but it was just not the right time. I was too busy on the road, whatever your reason is. And when I started it, I thought, well, quit trying to start this huge business and this, charity and stuff, and just find a few people that might even want to do it. So that's what I started with. I spent a year, for the big band looking for different musicians. I visited a club and I liked going to see people and thinking, oh, maybe I could approach them. That was exciting to me. And breaking it down into small bits. But man, that first step, every single time, the big band did not turn out how I thought it would be. It turned out better. And guitar lessons did not turn out how I thought it would be. It didn't even really turn out to be a guitar lesson, but it turned out to be better. Every single thing is that step. And no matter how many times I keep proving to myself that the step is the only difference, I still sometimes go, I should really, fill in the blank. And that first step, it's just that first step. How do you take that first step to do it? And boy, there are millions of people out there telling you, if you take this first step in exercise, or you take this first step in relationships, and, it'll turn out, but yet most people don't. And what what is the key to me? I guess the key to me in some ways, besides taking the first step, is knowing that it might not be guitar lessons that I'm searching for or the big band that I'm searching for, because things keep turning out differently.
Well,
On a
that's what it
personal
feels
level,
like.
I never thought I'd ever get married.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, no, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling on, but I think that I never thought I wanted to get married, and in some ways taking the first step years and years and years after what most people did, it turned into amazing. I could have taken that first step many other points in my life. And honestly, it would have been okay. I mean, even then, it would have been okay. It would have been different than what you have, but it would have been okay. I'm glad that I, made the choices I did. But it's still, even that first step, I was like, but then, you take the first step and you keep going, which I think most people understand in any sort of relationship. But man, I can't say enough about the first step. Every single thing I've wanted to do worked out. My only regret is not taking the first step earlier. So I would just say to anybody, when we go into schools, I'm like, people are like, how do I become a singer? How do I become on stage? I'm like, just do something. Go to sing in your church, go sing in your bedroom, put up a video, do anything, just anything other than wishing.
Well, it's so interesting to hear you say that. Well, first of all, when I think about, I know Mary a little bit, your wife, and I hope that's okay to mention her, but it's hard for me to imagine you with
Of
anybody
course.
else. You guys just seem so absolutely creatively perfect together, and the stuff that you post on your social media stuff with her and with your daughters is absolutely off the charts, fantastic, fun to watch. Just the stuff that you just did recently about your daughter telling you have to write better songs is absolutely gold. So I just love that stuff. But
Thank you.
I sort of hear two things in your message, and maybe you can help me reconcile them a little bit. I think I know the answer, but I'd love to hear you say this, because I think a lot of people are in this camp where you're saying things like, just take the first step, it always works out. And then I'm hearing things like, I took this first step and it really wasn't what I wanted, so I pivoted. It wasn't guitar lessons. It was, okay, this was the right person that I needed to be partnered with. And so we started doing songwriting, or, some of these other pieces where you actually took that first step. It didn't really work out, but you switched directions. You kind of kept moving forward. So kind of on one hand, I'm hearing, just take a first step. It's always worked out for me. And on the other side, I'm hearing, I took this step, it didn't really work. So I adjusted and made some changes and had it work. And so kind of help reconcile that a little bit, because I think many people, they take that first step, right? And then it doesn't really work out. They take the guitar lessons, they realize they're not really into it. They kind of suck at guitar, whatever it might be. And then they just kind of quit and say it's over. So how do people get over that hump of, the first baby step didn't work, but how do I keep going, trying to, move in the same direction that I want to go?
Yeah, I love that. I love the pivot thing because I've been doing that, even using that word lately. And I think in some ways I wouldn't have the opportunity to pivot, which might probably be obvious to a lot of people, but I wouldn't have the opportunity without taking the step.
Yeah.
So in some ways, I'm like, I never have the opportunity to pivot anywhere if I don't start the first step. I would never, in the guitar scenario, met Micah, he's my guitar teacher, realized how fantastic he is, that his also, which I didn't know until we did pivot to writing songs, he's like, man, I've been in like a bar band and enjoying myself and doing it, but I've never gotten a chance to write songs. I've never really
Mm.
gotten a chance to put my own stamp on things. I've never gotten a chance to perform. I had him come out and perform at the Pavilion here in Sioux Falls
Oh,
at Christmas,
cool.
and he was like, it was just so fun because people were listening to you. Like I'm used to a bar where no one's listening, so you just play what you want, and and it's all good. So it's just a different experience, not worse or better, but just different. And and I think the pivoting thing to me is, I guess it's saying, in some ways, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, if I keep taking guitar lessons for 20 years and I hate it, but I'll probably become a pretty good guitar player. That's true. You would.
Hmm.
If you sat there and you hated it, but you went every Tuesday. But I think in some ways, as an adult, it's probably harder as a kid because you're like, oh, I don't like this. I'm quitting the first day. Well,
Right.
I think as an adult, you think you got to give something more time. And I did give a year, almost, maybe under a year. But as I was doing it, I'm like, well, I'm really not getting into this, but I'm doing it, and doing it's better than nothing. But I think the pivot was staying open to, well, what could I keep going here? What there is a part of it I liked, like open to that possibility, because at that point I really liked Micah. He had this great
Mm-hmm.
personality. He's a fantastic guitar player. I didn't really want to. I stopped guitar lessons, and he's no longer in my sphere. So I thought, in some ways, I'm like, how do I keep the good of it? And I
Yeah.
think it's staying open to what's the good part that you like. Because maybe it's not for me, it wasn't the guitar lesson. It was camaraderie in music. It was working on something. It was trying to improve is probably the bigger part for me. I was
Mm-hmm.
trying to actually improve something more than it was the guitar, you know, and it might be like said for your wife, if it's piano, it might just be, it's just piano, but maybe it's, I want something creative, or I want to learn
Mm-hmm.
something I never got to learn. You know, it might not be the piano, and maybe she meets somebody piano, or it just gives her the courage to do something else that isn't piano. And suddenly she's, you know, she's bobsledding, or, you know,
Right.
whatever it might
Yeah,
be.
no, I
And,
think for her it was a recapturing of the nostalgia of her youth. That's really what it ultimately was. She wanted to learn how to play piano so that she could play songs from her childhood sitting in an empty house with the sun shining through the window. Like the piano was the medium
it's perfect.
to get to where you wanted to go. And that's what it sounds like what you're saying too, is the guitar, whatever, it's sort of, I'm trying to get camaraderie in music and partner with somebody who can take my creativity to the next level. You didn't realize that when you just wanted to learn guitar,
Right.
but that's what Micah brought you. And I talk quite a bit about how important it is just to get the right peeps in our Jeep. I mean, you'll appreciate that. It's sort of a safari reference, you know, and
I
that's
love
really
it.
what it seems like. That's what you found in Micah is, okay, I've got the right person in my Jeep. They're just not, it's not the guitar thing that we need to do. We need to do something else. And I love that idea of, and that helped me reconcile it, of saying, well, I did this. It wasn't exactly what I thought it would be, but there's some good things in it. How do I keep hold of those and carry those forward? I love
Yeah, because if I was a genius, I would know all this before, but I'm not. And
that.
that's the thing, is that's the same thing, right? Because you're like, okay, but if I had never done any of this thing, I just sit here. The only thing I have is this one-sided wish. Like, to me, it's like the one
Yeah.
facet. You have a wish. That's great. You can sit there and think about the wish all day, but it never really changes from what a wish. But under that, like I said, when you start the guitar and you keep going, again, you realize things as you keep moving and pushing and prodding. I feel like you're in like sometimes a bubble, and you just pushing with an arm and you're pushing with a leg, and then you're like, oh, there's something else out there. There's something else. There's something else. And I'm not just sitting floating around in this bubble. I'm, you know,
Yeah.
bumping into other bubbles, right? This
Right.
could be a children's book. Anyway,
Bubbles
my grandma,
everywhere.
when she was, for what, I remember my grandma when had a dream. I don't know what this is. She's no longer with us, but when she had a dream she'd always had this recurring dream, and she was always in a bubble floating, and she'd bounce off the ceiling for some reason and bounce off. But anyway,
Hmm.
she'd always wake up dying laughing. So for whatever reason, I just thought of my grandmother there, because she would wake up, cry laughing,
Huh.
because it was so fun floating in this bubble through the rooms of her house and bumping into the ceiling, I guess. But anyway,
That
the
is super sweet. I love that. Let me ask you this question.
but yeah,
You
go ahead.
mentioned you know, just some of the struggles that you've gone through, whatever those look like, whether it's in songwriting or figuring out, you know, the business or whatever that is. Like how what have you learned from those things? Like what or how have those sort of shaped your, you know, who you are today? So more than just sort of, you know, I'm trying to do this thing, it didn't quite work out, I found somebody else. But you know, we all have those periods or those things that are really, really tough, whether they're personal, their business, whatever they are, those things that we walk through. And you're welcome to share those if you want. But I'm kind of curious just from your perspective, because I just love how you think about life. But what have your struggles like taught you about life or taught you about yourself, or how are you using those now in being the person that you are?
Oh man, you asked a lot of good questions, I gotta say. Usually I'm used to a radio interview or TV interview. They're like,
Oh,
what's the latest, Sean? And you're like, well, we're going on
yeah,
tour. Okay, great. Nice
I
talking
don't
to you on
care what
take
your
two this
tour
morning.
dates are. I don't care what your new song. You know, I do, but what I really want to know, and the reason I
I
ask you on the show is
understand.
because I love how you think about life, and I know you've thought about some of this stuff, or at least you'll be able to kind of reconcile it with your world. So yeah, I'm not really your classic radio guy.
I love it. No, I love it. It's great. It's a total change.
Good.
I think, like I said, everybody has the challenges, and we all say that and we all believe it. But sometimes I think, boy, but we really do. Like,
Hmm.
I think just to give it lip service and say, yeah, everybody's got challenges, right? But then I tend to look at my own challenges and think, yeah, I mean, they got challenges, but they didn't have to do this, 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 this. And
Hmm.
you might not even say that. I don't think I say that openly, but I think sometimes I have acted or felt that way where I'm like, yeah, yeah, everybody's got challenges. True, true, true. But oh my gosh,
Yeah.
look at all these things I've got to do. I'm saying this in my own head. I'm not,
Yep.
again, not saying this to other people. So part of the thing I think I've learned is that the challenges that I have and the things that I think I've faced and the things that no one else has had to do, I mean, truly, honestly, at whatever depth uh, we can live, everybody does have that. I mean, they truly do. Yeah, we're all not the same.
Hmm.
We're all there are people that have worse and better. I always think no matter what happens to me, somebody's got it worse. When I hear or better, I hear about people who like I've got 4 jobs and my grandma died and my dog got
Hmm.
run over and I've got 6 kids who are sick and I'm always like, wow. But then someone else is like, oh, I got 12 jobs and
Right.
13 kids who are sick and my
Right.
grandma and grandpa
Yeah,
died and
no,
my
it's true.
dog and cat got run over. And so no matter what I have been doing, no matter how something has been amazing or not as amazing, I think, well, there are obviously people in the world that have more. I think I've, or less, I think I've relayed this story to you, but I was at a wedding, and this is true. I was at a wedding. We were all sitting around a table. It's a very fancy wedding, and there was a guy that came in a UPS uniform, and this is making a point, I hope, but he came in a UPS uniform, sat down in like the brown shorts and the brown thing. He said, "I just got off work. I didn't have time to change." I mean, seriously, this was like everybody in tuxedo at this wedding.
Yeah.
And he sat next to me, and I thought, boy, he was so interesting. He started talking about all these things. But the people at the table, I mean, you could tell were just like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, like, this is funny. This is kind of a joke. He was a young, cool looking guy and everything. But, you could tell people were distancing from this guy. And I thought, man, how solid must you be to come into
Hmm.
this knowing he wasn't trying to stand out. I mean, he was just legitimately like, I want to celebrate my friends. I do
Yeah.
not have enough time to go home from my route. And so he's doing this. Well, then he starts talking about all this, and everyone had left the table by then. But he played soccer like professionally, like around the world.
Hmm.
He had gone like to be a marine biologist. He was in like the Galapagos at one point, banning turtles or whatever he was doing. And I just was like, wow. I mean, you never know who you're sitting at a table with, and that's my point. Is in some ways even before. I say that all the time to myself. You never know who you're sitting at the table with. So no matter how great you think you are or how terrible you think things are, you just never know who's sitting at that table. And for myself, at times, I mean, last year I was so pumped. This had to do with music. We got on Billboard. We were in the top 5 of Billboard, and
Hmm.
I never thought in my life, as just some independent musician out of the Midwest who honestly loves singing but isn't the greatest singer in the world. I never thought in a billion years. I heard it when I was in Chicago, and my wife told me, and I was just like, we just both fell on the floor like hugging and laughing because we were just like, this is insane. On the other hand, 5 years ago, I one of the people that I had worked with and trusted my whole life embezzled from the company that
Hmm.
I worked with, and we had to go through this terrible 3-year court case, and it was just horrendous. But when I thought about it all, I thought again, you never know when you're telling somebody either of these things, the good or the bad, or you're sharing things with anybody. You never know what they have done, just like that UPS guy, or what they've experienced or what they do. And you hear that from everybody, like you never know. But it's become so true to me. So I mean, the one lesson to me, I guess, as I've gotten older and as I've gone through all these things, like everybody, that's the one thing to me is just you never know. I always think of the guy in the brown UPS shorts
Yeah.
sitting at the table.
I love that so much. And that's frankly why I'm doing this podcast. Everybody has a story, and some of that, like you said, you never know who's been through what, but you also know who's had these amazing, cool things happen in their lives. All of these insights that people have, everybody has a story. And I think it's one of the unfortunate things about general society is that, as people get older, we tend to discount their worth. And these people are just filled with these stories. They've been through unbelievably crazy, difficult things, unbelievably crazy, cool things. And so you just, like you said, you just never know. And so to sort of make this assumption, we generally are self-absorbed, and that's not even always a negative thing. It's just, the world revolves around ourselves because those are the decisions that we're making. That's, who we're concerned with.
Sure.
But when we actually pause and we hear stories from other people, it makes us realize that we are part of something bigger than just ourselves. And I'm kind of
That's like
curious.
you. That's like you, if I can interject, because seriously, if I just met you on the street, just like if you met me on the street the same way, you'd be like, oh, there's a guy walking by and he lives in a smaller town in Minnesota, right? And,
Yeah.
these experiences. But in meeting you and being like, I mean, it's crazy what you have done in your life, what you've decided to do, the struggles that you've gone through in, and I don't want to get into it unless you want to, but, in the things that you have actually been and participated in.
Hmm.
And then to me, again, how I've loved you for that, because you're so open about it, so open about what you've done, why you've tried to do it, what you've, whatever, not in some bragging way or not in some self-absorbed way at all. I'd never have gotten that from you. But it is crazy. Like I said, if I just met you on the street, again, you would just pass, and you don't have the time to find everybody's story. But to me, it gives me so much passion when you find those few people. I don't think you're saying go out in the world and find everybody's story, but when you take the time, like you said, even for the little bit, to find your own story too, and to find these other people's stories and how much they propel yours, how much passion it can like instantly inject into what you're doing, instead of, like
Mm.
you said, you're sitting there wishing in your own head. So for me, for you and for me, it's like a song.
For you, for me,
For
yeah.
you, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're one of the most inspirational people I met, but people would never know that if they don't get to talk to you.
Well, that's incredibly generous, Sean. Thank you. Thank you for that. But yeah, I think it is true. We all have the story. And, I'm one of these people that I love to chat about all my experiences, but I don't generally force it upon people. So when people ask me, I'm like, yeah, let's chat about this stuff, but I'm generally not out there saying, hey, you should hear my story. And so that's why I do things like these podcasts where I can just ask other people their stories, and try to milk that. But yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think, you and I share that in common. I think, we have a lot of things that we've been through and a lot of things that we've thought about, a lot of insights for life. I remember, I think one of the first times I met you, I still remember this. You describe yourself as a collector of experiences. Do you remember that? Is that still something
That's
that you
true.
use to describe yourself as?
I don't know if I ever used it before or after, but it's definitely, when you say it, I can see myself saying it, because
Yeah.
I always think that's what you have. That's what you're left with. People always like, you're left with your memories, so to speak. You either make a lot of memories or it all melds into a
Yeah.
lot of weeks of something. And it isn't to me a trip down the Nile necessarily. I get that. It
Hmm.
doesn't have to be that. But somehow those experiences in life that and I'm talking about the experiences in some ways that you instigate, because again, experiences can just happen to you. I think you can just walk through life and you're like, oh, I remember that time I got a promotion at my job,
Right.
and
Right.
oh, I remember that time I built a house and I had two kids. I think that all just happens to you. I mean, not saying that you don't
Hmm.
choose a lot of those things. I get it. But I think the really active, like, experiences, those are the memories. Like my memories, of course, if someone says, hey, what was your favorite birthday present, or what's your favorite vacation? Yeah, I get all that. But that's kind of everybody. I'm talking about the things to me that are above and beyond or extraordinary, probably.
Mm.
And those are the memories to me, that every single extraordinary memory I have and every single extraordinary memory I've collected is because, again, to me, I took an action to make it happen, and it always did in some way. And
Oh,
when
that's
I
so
sat
good.
back and let life happen to me, and when I sat back, and I think sometimes I could sit here and pride myself and be like, I'm raising three good daughters, and I have a job, and I put, food on the table and shelter on the house. I, I totally agree that those are all wonderful and they're all hard work, but I think in some ways they're not extraordinary. I think now I know a lot of people would disagree with me there, but I think in some ways that's life. Like, you're gonna find a relationship, you're gonna try to find shelter, you're gonna hopefully have food, and you're gonna try to help those who don't, but or don't have as much luck or advantage or whatever it might be. But I do think it's the extraordinary experiences. And again, I'm certainly not referring to, I once rappelled off a bridge in West Virginia, which I did, but I don't count that as my great experience. I just think that's, that's almost like, that goes back to that sort of one faceted thing. I think it's like, yeah, that was fun. That was great. And I'll
Yeah.
remember it, but it's not the memory that is like the undercurrent of so many others.
The life-changing sort of perspective, paradigm shifting experiences.
Yeah. And the things I think that really, really hopefully, give you what you want to be and the changes that you want to do. And I don't think any of those. I think you can just
Yeah.
coast through life in a lot of ways and be whoever you're going to be. And usually it's good. I say sometimes in the show when I'm talking to people, I've said it a lot where, someone's married for 50 years and everyone claps and I will say something to the effect of, why are you clapping? Because you don't know if this person's happy. And everyone's like, oh, ha, ha,
Right.
ha, because of course they are. But the thing is about it is I also believe that. Like I
Yeah.
actually know a lot of people, I'll just use my family or cousins or different things, where when you talk to the two people individually, they weren't really that happy. They got to the end of a they got to
Yeah.
the end of a
Right.
goal and they're like, we made it 50 years, and everyone's like, oh wow. But to me again, that isn't an experience. That to me was kind of coasting. And
Mhm.
I'm not trying to be judgmental, but if you talk to people, they would agree of my family. I'm only going to talk about my family. I'm not going to talk about, that you talk to them. They're like, yeah, yeah. I mean, if you really, really get down to it and I really say, I was probably just coasting. We weren't really supposed to be together. We were together for this reason or this reason or this reason. And we lived a whole life and had kids and it was, it was a wonderful life. Because who's going to say at the end of their life, oh, it was a horrible life. I made every decision
Right.
wrong,
Right.
you know?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I don't want to get to that. I don't want to
Love it.
really in the deepest dark recesses of my soul say, in the last days, yeah, 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 I did all these great things and it was great. But somewhere, somehow I know it, that wasn't necessarily the truth.
It maybe could have
And
been,
so
it wasn't
that
your best
drives me. It keeps me
life.
awake at night.
I love that. I
Yeah, it
mean,
wasn't your best life because, yeah,
yeah, I mean, because, I think
sorry, I get too
about,
excited.
no, I think we have a little bit of a delay on the phone. So I think that's what's going on. But like, I talk about, again, Africa, which is near and dear to my heart. But, we went on the first time we went, we ended our humanitarian trip with a safari and we just kind of took the default safari they gave us. And it was good. It was
Yes.
good. But now, we've gone 4 times and with each time we learn new things about what we want to do. And so now we're more intentional about choosing the safari that we actually want that's best for our trip. And I feel like that's kind of life, right? You can have a lot of good experiences where you just kind of accept the default and they're good, they're adequate. And like you're saying, you're still going to have birthdays and you're going to have all these things. But I think maybe what I hear you saying is if we can transition our thinking a little bit to say, what's my best safari? What's my best life? What really makes me come alive? And start being intentional about taking steps toward that, then you can, get to the end of your life and feel like, what, I really went after it. I really tried to live the life that was best
Hmm.
for me to live versus just accepting the default life, which was good, right? It's the Jim Collins good is the enemy of great, in a sort of a life
Yes.
application way.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, you always see the thing. It's like I want to slide into home plate exhausted or whatever that saying is.
Yeah.
I think that's so true. Like I want to be wiped out, whatever my last day is. I
Mm,
mean, wiped out because I just pushed and pushed and pushed and tried and tried and tried. And some people are like, "What's the point of that?" But I'm like, to me, I'm like, in some ways, it's the no regrets. I think you're always going to have some regrets, but I just think if I could cut down on the regrets, that's all I want to try to do.
right.
Cut down a little bit on it.
Well, let me ask you this, as we're kind of getting near the end of our time, but I know that you're taking this approach toward life where you're trying to, end exhausted and you're trying to do things that make you come fully alive and be in relationships with people that inspire you, and I love all that. But is there part of you? How much does it mean to you to know, or have you thought about this intentionally? About the thousands and thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions, I don't know, of people who you have brought joy to through your music. Like, I know you're doing this because you love to do it, and I know there's part of it that really fulfills you. Do you ever stop and look and say, there have been, and I'm one of them, my whole family, my whole extended family loves your music, loves the entertainment you brought. But do you pause and say, what, I have brought joy and smiles from people whatever you used to say, from 2 to 92, whatever your age range was, millions of people across this planet. Do you ever pause and think about that? And if you do, or if you have, or maybe now, what does that mean? Does that mean anything to you at this point?
To be honest, I haven't. When you say that, I think, boy, that sounds kind of obvious, but I actually never have. I think my default response, and not trying to be anything other than truthful, would be I probably do it more for myself.
Mm-hmm.
There is something in me that I go somewhere else a lot of times, not every song or every day, but I go somewhere else a lot when I'm singing.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways when I'm singing, it is the truest me. Like people always say, oh, what are you really like? Or, how are you
Right.
like off stage, or different things. But to be honest, I really am more me, not on stage of how I'm necessarily talking or dressing or moving, but I'm more me in a song than I probably ever am anywhere else. Because for some reason, there is something in music, without getting too, mystical, magical. I don't know what it is, but there's something in music that so many times, I think when you're doing something you love, I guess, but I definitely have stood on stage and an hour later, I don't remember a single piece, not one single thing. I don't remember anything about it. And there's something about, boy, I feel like I could just pour myself into words or melodies or movement or tempo. It doesn't mean that it comes out as some grand opus. Maybe no one else is affected by it, but for me, it just moves me. It moves me to try to do greater things, deeper things, try to understand better. But it also stays out of my head. One of the things somebody had said to me in a studio in Nashville, actually a long time ago, which maybe makes sense to you, maybe it doesn't, but to me it did. They're like, you're a good singer, or a great singer, or whatever you want to say, because you're not in your head. And I never knew what that meant really, but so many singers are like, oh, that pitch and that thing, and
right.
I'm going to do this trill, and I'm going to, whatever. I've managed somehow to stay out of my head. And actually I worry sometimes about going too much into my head. So I stay out of it when I'm singing, and it's almost everything from your heart or soul or whatever you want to say. And so for me, that was important. Like, I don't know, staying out of your head, I guess, but I've never considered what it does for people, or what it does. Once in a while though, somebody says something to me or writes something to me that is so moving, or different. And I keep those very few. Over 15 years or 20 years or however long of singing, I have kept probably 10 comments or notes or letters about music. Because if someone comes up to you after, like for you, you give a speech and 40 people go, hey, great. Oh, it's really moved the company. Great. Steve, you're awesome. Great. Wow, that was great. What a good message. Great. It's not that it's bad, but you just you take it with a grain of salt, because you don't sit there and say, I am great, but that was awesome. You're your own worst critic, right? So you tend to go, gosh, that's the part that's in your head. But when I'm actually performing, you're actually doing it, that's all not in my head. That's all in your heart. And once in a while, somebody says something, probably, because you feel, I guess, like they really got it. So somebody asks you a question or says something where it isn't like, wow, you're so great, you moved me so much, it was so wonderful. It was more like, I don't know, it's almost something like when you sang that third phrase, there's a reason you jumped to that note, because I think you felt that, you're just like, whoa, that's totally true. On the other hand, I remember going to John Hassler, the author from kind of central Minnesota. He had a lot of different books. One of my best things, I saw him giving a talk, and these people kept standing up and they're like, oh, this moved me. And he'd kind of go, oh, okay, good. And then the next person would be like, in the third chapter, did you mean to have the irony that you did by using the, whatever? And he'd be like, oh, yeah. But I thought the best part is, at one point, this person stood up and said, the use of the, whatever language in the way that you did, and you portrayed this character, and they thought this, and they went through this whole thing, and did you purposely mean to write that character by saying, and I thought it was interesting because most of the authors I'd been to would go, yes,
Yeah.
you got that. And you're right. And he said, never thought about that.
Hmm.
And that was it. Like, oh, I never thought about it. And I thought, oh, that's so awesome. It was so
It is
true because it was
awesome.
like, it was just like, huh, rather than, yes, that part I thought of, and that part I thought of, and that part I thought of, and that part was great. I don't know where I'm necessarily going with all
Well,
this,
no,
but
I love the
I
honesty. I
love
love the
the
authenticity of that.
humility.
I love just saying, you know what, here's why I do what I do, and I wrote it for this reason, or for you, I did the songs for this reason. But there's going to be stuff in there that people take away that you didn't intentionally plan for, and I think that's beautiful. And I
Hmm.
think leaving space for that is beautiful, rather than trying to claim everything that people take away from it. It's like a great piece of art. Everybody's going to take different things away from it, and not all of those things are going to be something the artist had planned on. And I think as soon as we start moving to that place of I need to take credit for all of the movement that people feel in their spirit because of my creativity, I think that's where we move from sort of this humble place of just having, I do this because I'm passionate about doing it, to now it's about me. Somehow I need to be seen as something more than I am. And I think what you said, one of the things that really resonated with me is, because you're in your head, because you're not focusing on the people, it's the passion that you have for doing what you do. And I think that's what's attractive, versus trying to manufacture that. Oh, I need
Hmm.
to. It's like when people talk to me about building a brand, I would run screaming, because there's nothing wrong with building a brand, but I feel like your brand, it's really more about communicating what brand you have, more than trying to, okay,
Yeah,
how
good
do we
point.
create a brand that people will resonate with? Well, if they're not resonating with who you are and the passion you have, especially for you as an entertainer, I don't care what kind of brand you build. Like if you build this brand of, hey, we're going to come in and do these, really intense talks every night, and then you just sing from your heart, well, your brand isn't that you do really intense talks. Your brand is that you have fun and you're passionate about what you do, right? I mean, it doesn't make sense. So I think that's kind of what's happening there,
That's a good point.
is you're just following your passion. And you sort of dodged the question, so I do want to put it out there one more time, which
Sorry.
I'm not surprised you dodged it, because I know you well enough to not be surprised by this. But okay, so you don't intentionally think about the people very often that you've impacted, other than those few people that really seem to get it, over the years. But if I were to tell you right now, Shaun, that hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people worldwide have been entertained by the gift that you have, or by your passion, or by whatever it is, you don't even need to take credit for it, just that millions of people have have their lives have been happier because they've been exposed to Tonic Solfa, or the big band experience, or Shaun Johnson in some way, shape, or form. How does that make you feel? Is there, what's your reaction to that?
Ah, gosh, this is a good thing for you're asking me all these questions and stuff, but it's interesting because in so many ways I don't have most things. I don't have anything really figured out. So
Yeah.
it's a it's kind of interesting because it forces you again. This is a great conversation in that it forces me to take a breath, really think about what that is, and then I'm going to be thinking about this for the next year. Thanks a lot. But
You're welcome. I mean, plaguing your thoughts.
I don't know. I mean, my first reaction, of course, is probably like, well, as I had said earlier, there's so many people who do so much more. So you kind of discount it, right? Because
Hmm.
you say, well, this is just such a tiny thing. I'm not
Sure.
some hugely famous people. There are people who do much more, and I think have much more reach, not even in numbers, but just in how impactful what they do is. I mean, if it's a dentist repairing something, and I'm not, you
Hmm.
know, that might make more impact than me singing for 1,000 people. So I guess in some ways I don't know, when I think about all that, I think of a million first steps back to what we were saying. I think of, which again, this probably still won't answer your question the second go around, but I think that I like the fact that I am doing something that could have an impact, in my opinion, as compared to something that, in my opinion, might not have had an
Mm.
impact. Um, I'm I'm proud, I guess, of the fact of it's work. It's a lot of work, And as people said, it never really seemed like it. That's not necessarily true for me. Sometimes it did, but but I somehow appreciate that all the work led me to this, because I don't feel like I'm in some end here or some even middle, but um, I can see I guess that has some impact, and that makes me passionate about the next things I do, the next pivots, where I'm going to go, that it has some impact. And again, I think you could say, well, doesn't everything you do have some impact? I'm like, yeah, of course it does. You can make an argument that me making a peanut butter sandwich for my daughter had an impact.
Mm-hmm.
You can make an argument about anything, but I think you know, if you're looking at your life and
Yeah.
say, no, I think it had more of an impact than some of the other choices I could have done. And that makes me happy thus far. It doesn't make me feel like, oh, it just makes me feel like, okay, I got to keep doing that though. It's like a workout. You can't
Mm.
just go, well, I'm feeling pretty good about myself, so now I don't need to work out for the next 5 years. I mean, for me, um, figuratively and literally, I'm like, okay, I'm happy so far with the workout in
Mm.
general, but now it's given me a good base. It's given me a good launching pad, and I want to keep going.
I
Yeah, I don't
love it.
know. I mean,
Yeah.
if I was turning the question around, what would you
No,
say?
no, no,
What
no,
would you
no.
say you?
I asked the
I need some
questions
wisdom
here.
here.
I asked the
Oh, come
questions here.
on.
This is why I have to have a podcast. So like I can ask the questions, don't have to answer the questions.
Oh man, what?
Well, I think for me, I
Yeah,
mean,
I gotta think about that one.
well, no, it comes down to I think ultimately one of the things that I help people with is just trying to clarify what they actually want from their life. And once you have clarity on what you
Yeah,
want from your life, then you can sort of align. Am I having that? So there's no right answer to the question of what does it make you feel. If millions of people's lives are better because they've been exposed to you, until you know what are you actually trying to do with your life. And so that's what I think.
right.
That's what you're in your mind reconciling right there. Is well, what am I ultimately trying to do? And the million people
Mm-hmm.
in and of itself isn't necessarily satisfying that, because my goal in life isn't to
No,
make a million people more joyful. So the goal in your life is to live the kind of life that you want to live. And so that's, I think, what you're wrestling with. And I think because some people might be listening going, well, how can you not just say that's amazing? Well, it is amazing, but I think what I sense is you're lining that up to, but that's not my goal in life. So how am I doing relative to what
no.
I've set out to do, the workout that I've tried to set out for myself. So that's what I love, that you're not just flippantly answering that with, oh, it's amazing, life is perfect, because that's not your measuring stick, and I love that. Well, I would say there's a
Well,
ton I
I
want to
love
talk about.
you. Come on.
Well, thanks, man. Well, I want to wrap it up here. I want to honor your time, but we could talk obviously for hours,
Yes,
and we'll have you on the show again at some point. But like, because I'd love to talk to you about like the early
love
days
to.
of like Shelvis. Like, I want to find out like how annoying is it to have to do the same character over and over again. I'd love to talk to you more about being shy and if you're still kind of there. But I think as we close off here, I'd love to
Yes.
know um, what what would you say to people out there that you want to encourage to kind of live their best life, whatever that is. It's not your life, it's not my life, but figuring out what their kind of best life is, their most fulfilling life is, but they're maybe a little bit trapped or they're complacent or whatever it is. Do you have any thoughts on either resources or things that people should be thinking about if they're saying, what, I really do want to live a more fulfilling life, but I just kind of feel stuck?
Yeah, I mean, everybody does at points, of course, and or for long times or short times, and there's so many different facets to that. But for me, purposely, I think I constantly keep in mind that I don't have any time. Not that I'm busy and I don't have any time. I mean that I don't have any time. Like I either have a couple of years left, I've got a day left.
Mm,
I'm always talking about that. I mean, I just feel, but I have since I was a kid. I mean, the crush of time. I'm like, and if you don't, I would think, to me, like, start thinking about it, because people whose lives were cut short, whose careers were cut short. Not even, I'm not saying because of death or anything even, just, but things change, and the
hmm.
things that they wanted to do or the people that they were with. But man, time is so, so, so short. So the only thing I would say, if you have a very short time, which I do, and I think everybody does, then you got to move. You got to move. Like in some way, you have to take one step. Trust that it will turn somewhere, because you're not going to end up in a corner crying. You might along the way, but it's like, it's just going to, in some ways, you got to keep moving in whatever it is. I mean, I think, you can listen to 5,000 people's life stories. You can read every book in the world. You can wish that you were that person over there and that person over there. But I just listened last night. Dave Barnes, one of my favorite singer-songwriters from Nashville. A lot of people don't know him, but he's written songs for a lot of people. He has his own amazing career. He can sell out the rhyme. And last night he was doing Quarantunes, like so many people, where he's just singing in his house. And it's fantastic. And thousands of people love him. He's very famous. He's gotten Grammys and all sorts of things. But I listened to him on a podcast, and I was so surprised, because he said, all my friends are doing so good. And he was like, I'm just not sure what I'm supposed to be doing. My career didn't take off as much as I thought. My songwriting isn't as much as I thought. Just wasn't so sure what to do. And the whole podcast was kind of about that. But I sat there thinking, what? I mean, if I could write half the songs he'd written and all the things, and sell out the rhyming by just me and a guitar and all these things, I'm like, how are you saying that? Like, what are you talking about? Now, Ben Richter is one of his friends, who's another famous singer who is doing probably, in their circle and doing really good and all this stuff. But my point of that is you can't really look around and go, okay, on YouTube and this other person in my community and this, this doctor that I'm a doctor with, or whatever it might be. I think sometimes you just got to move for you. You just got to move in a direction, because people always come up to me and say, I'd give anything to do what you're doing. And it never really hits me, because I think, what? You got to be insane. I mean, but that's a common comment. Oh, I'd give anything to do what you're doing. And I think, first of all, like anybody, you'd be like, well, you probably wouldn't if you knew all the ins and outs. And I think of that about Dave Barnes. I'd be like, I'd give anything to do what he was doing in the music world. But then he says, honestly, like, man, I didn't know what I was doing for the last few years. And he's pivoted and turned more towards, I'm going to collaborate with younger singer-songwriters. I'm going to sell some of my songs. And it's not so much about, am I going to have 10,000 people and be famous? So for me, I would say, again, you don't have much time. You don't need to be like anybody else. And so start moving in the direction of you, whatever that means. Like I said, your wife taking piano lessons, it's probably not for piano. Me taking guitar lessons, it's probably not for that. You starting a podcast, it might not be the podcast that's the point.
Oh, I love that so much. One of the analogies I use in the whole life as a safari thing is, at some point the park's going to close. We only have so much time.
Exactly.
We only have so much time in the park, and the longer we sort of stay at headquarters looking through the magazines, that's less time we're out there, exploring everything that's on the Masai Mara or wherever.
Yeah, if Frank Sinatra, if he had decided, I'm not, I got this voice and I got all this stuff and I got all these talents, but you know what? I got other things to do and other things, whatever. If he had not decided, but by the time he was 70 years old, if he'd said, I think I'm going to become Frank Sinatra and sing, I think I'm going to follow my true calling, he never would have. He'd still be Frank Sinatra with that voice, but it would never have happened. I mean, I don't mean happen like fame and fortune. I mean, he would not have done it. It just would be over. It's like you said. I mean, if somebody is like an amazing basketball player, but they want to start when they're 50, the chances are you are never going to be, I mean, not that you can't enjoy it or do whatever you want to do. I'm not saying that, but exactly what you're saying. I mean, I think the same thing. If you don't start today, you have no idea if you have tomorrow. You have no idea if it's too late. You have no idea. And I mean, you're still alive. Again, I'm not saying because you're dying. I'm saying it's because it's over. That chance is over.
Windows closed.
And I think so many people can, and they can, and you can spin it however you want. I think that's the other thing is like everybody can spin, whatever into good, which is fine. You can say, nope, I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. Nope, my plan was how the plan was supposed to be. Nope, but I think that's saying you're not active participant in any way. And to me personally, I don't agree. Like, I think if you think that it's all just going to be how it's going to be and your choices will just kind of be heaped upon you and your choices will accidentally come again, I know people disagree and that's fine. I'm not saying I'm right. I just, in my opinion, I'm like, I think you have to be an active participant, or like you said, you're just stuck thumbing through the magazine. And great, you end your life. The magazine was awesome,
Yeah.
and
The
you met
the
people that
lodge
came
is a
through the
very
headquarters.
comfortable
And
place. Yeah, the lodge is a very comfortable place to
yeah,
hang
it
out,
was
and
great.
you can meet a lot of good people there. And if that's the
Yeah,
life that you want, that's great. But we know that one of the biggest things people end their life with is this sense of regret that they didn't go out on the Serengeti and explore life a
yeah,
little bit. And so, kind of with what you're saying too, there's also the flip side of saying, okay, if you're 50 years old, you could think, oh, I didn't get out on the Serengeti early enough. I didn't live my life early enough. Maybe you could regret that a little bit, but you still have life left. So get out there now. So
yes,
start living life
yes,
intentionally now with the time left that you do have on the park, because it's going to be a great life. And I love the idea of being intentional, like you're saying. There is this thing such as variance in the world, right? We're dealt better hands than others. We have some of us
of
have
course.
more positive experiences, more negative experiences, all of those things. But I think as we're intentional about moving in the direction we want to move, that's going to give us the best opportunity to end up living the kind of life we want to live. And I think that's what we all want, or that's what I want for other people. I want that for myself. I want that for you, Shaun. I want that for everybody listening, is to live the best possible life you can and to be in control of it. Don't just accept everything by default. Say, we do have a say in the kind of life that we want to lead. And I think that's what you're alluding to there.
I think we do. I think, like I said, I know a lot of people would say no, but I do think for me, and again, maybe it was all preordained or something, but I
Mm,
think, which is fine too. We're not, again, not
sure.
trying to make anybody upset, but I feel like for me, if, yeah, the more active I've become in my life, the better it's become.
Love it. So let's close off there. But how do people connect with you, Shaun? How, if people are saying, "Man, I like how this guy thinks. I'd like to kind of follow his journey, maybe follow his music." What's the best way for folks to connect?
I think the best way, is probably social media, because we put a lot about life and my family and traveling and what we're doing. And my wife works with it with me. And, we try to respect everybody's privacy, obviously. But we share a lot on Instagram and on Facebook and, those kind of things. And you could go on 50 different social media sites that we kind of feel like for our family with some sort of balance. It's interesting because my wife, Mary, she likes doing all the social media and videos and different things, but she does it for a different reason. She's not doing it to, like you said, create a brand or
Hmm.
even help out the business or something. She's doing it because she wants a record of it. She's
Yeah,
super creative, but she wants a record of us
love
in
that.
some small way. And it's a record to remind us. It's not a record like, oh, that's the memory that we're going to have, but it'll remind us of that time. It'll remind us. So she's helping me in doing all this stuff for that reason. Like, it's interesting because people do different things for different reasons. Um, but I think it's cool. She has all these things when she looks back at a funny video or something about, our house or touring or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not because she wants a memory of our house. It's because she wants a memory of that moment, that time. And so, yeah, people can definitely follow us. You can Google Shaun Johnson. My first name is Shaun, but Shaun Johnson Music, and that pretty much comes up with Tonic Solfa, which is the a cappella group, or the big band experience, which is, of course, the big band, and all that comes up. There's websites
Yep.
and all sorts of things, but I think
Right.
probably those two are the most important.
Okay, and I'll put some of the links in the show notes too, if folks are looking to connect with you that way as well. But we're gonna wrap up there. We'll come back with Shaun here. I've asked him to kind of share his one of his favorite quotes or some final words. But if you like what you're hearing, if you want to support what I'm doing with the podcast here, the writing, the speaking I'm doing, there's a few great things that I would ask you to do or ask you to consider. One is you can support the show at patreon.com/Steve Fredland. You could like, rate, and review the episodes of the podcast on iTunes. Feel free to connect with me on social media, like, share, and then just go to stevefredland.com, sign up for the email newsletter, and we can stay in touch that way. So with that, let's come back to Shaun. Shaun, what are your final words or a favorite quote that you have for the folks?
Yeah, that was interesting because I know you had mentioned that before, and I thought about all the different quotes. I don't have one that I typically say, this is the one that works for
Yeah.
me time in and time out, but one of the ones that comes to my head right away is from the music group U2 of all things.
Ah,
I'm not
okay.
even a big necessarily fan of U2, but I like their music. I'm not saying that, but it's just, they're not on my top 50 radar or anything.
They're no
But
tonic sulfa.
I listen to a lot. Yeah, right. Yeah, let's just keep pushing that out there. This podcast goes to 50 million people that fall on your every word, right?
Right.
But they were live in Milan, I think, or something, and I don't remember how Bono, the lead singer, said it, but it was something to the effect of, which I've always remembered, is like, my hope is that in order to defeat a monster, we don't become that monster.
Mm,
And I always thought he said it better than that, but I loved that idea. Like, when you're fighting against injustices or you're trying to move things in a positive way, or whatever, it's like, well, in order to get past that, or in this case, in order to defeat that, in order to get around your hang up, in order to whatever, like, don't become that hang up or don't become that problem. And that's a good thing, because it's like fight fire with fire. This is almost the opposite of that. Like, so I love that. I mean, you could look into like Martin Luther King or something, who obviously did fight things in a whole different way than the
yeah.
traditional sense of fighting, right? But I love that, like, don't become the thing, that you, in order to get around it or defeat it, don't become that thing. I love this, like, don't become the monster, in order to defeat the monster.
Yeah. Oh, I
I
love
love
that.
that part.
Love it. Well, thanks, Shaun. I appreciate you coming on the show, and we'll catch you all next week. Take care.